The dusty streets of Copper Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1875, fell silent as the auction began, but Olivia Owens stood tall despite the shackles binding her wrists. Her father's gambling debts had sealed her fate, but even as the auctioneer's voice rang out in the sweltering afternoon heat, she refused to bow her head. 2 coins. The voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife. I'll give you 2 copper pennies for the woman. Laughter rippled through the onlookers, but the auctioneer's face contorted with rage. This ain't no joke, mister. This here's a proper auction. Dust swirled around the boots of the tall stranger as he stepped forward, sunlight glinting off his sheriff's badge. I said 2 coins, he repeated, his voice steady as he held up the pennies between his fingers. That's all she's worth as property. He paused, looking directly at Olivia with eyes as blue as a summer sky. Because my heart tells me she's worth more than all the gold in these mountains as a free woman. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. In a town where she'd known nothing but cruelty since her father's death, this stranger's words struck her like a physical blow. Name's Dalton Vance, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sheriff of Copper Creek, and I'm putting an end to this auction. Selling people ain't legal in this territory, not anymore. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some men muttering angrily, others backing away. The auctioneer's face flushed red with anger. Her father's debts, he started. Can't be paid with his daughter's freedom, Sheriff Vance finished firmly. Now, somebody get those shackles off her before I start making arrests. As the key turned in her iron cuffs, Olivia found her voice at last. Why? She asked, rubbing her raw wrists. Why would you do this for a stranger? Sheriff Vance's weathered face softened slightly. Because some things are plain wrong, Miss Owens, and I've seen enough wrong in this world to last several lifetimes. The auctioneer spat at their feet. You've made an enemy today, Vance. Wouldn't be the first time, the sheriff replied evenly, then turned to Olivia. Miss, you'll need somewhere safe to stay. The boarding house at the edge of town has a spare room. Olivia straightened her threadbare dress, painfully aware of her disheveled appearance after days locked in the town jail. I have no money. I've got enough for a week's board, he said, not as charity but as a simple statement of fact. Should give you time to figure things out. As they walked away from the crowd, Olivia felt the weight of stares on her back, some curious, others hostile. The sheriff maintained a respectful distance beside her. Those men won't forget this, she said softly. My father owed them a small fortune. Sheriff Vance nodded. Gambling debts to criminals don't hold water in my town. Your father's mistakes died with him. Olivia stopped walking, forcing him to turn and face her. Those weren't just any men. That was Elijah Ward and his gang. They own half the businesses in this county. A muscle tightened in the sheriff's jaw. Not above the law, Miss Owens. Not in Copper Creek. The boarding house was a modest 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a crooked sign. The owner, Mrs. Henderson, was a stern-faced widow with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog Olivia's every flaw. She needs a bath and clean clothes, the sheriff said, placing coins on the counter. And decent meals for a week. Mrs. Henderson's gaze flickered between them. This ain't that kind of establishment, Sheriff. Never suggested it was, he replied coldly. Miss Owens has had a difficult time. She deserves some Christian charity. After the sheriff left, Mrs. Henderson showed Olivia to a small room at the back of the house. Baths down the hall. Dinner's at 6 sharp. Miss it and you go hungry. She paused at the door. And don't be getting ideas about the sheriff. Man's been a widower for 5 years. Hasn't looked at a woman since his Mary died in childbirth. Alone in the sparse room, Olivia sank onto the narrow bed. Freedom felt strange after days of captivity, yet she knew it was tenuous at best. Ward wouldn't forget her father's $2,000 debt. And now he had a new enemy in the sheriff who'd intervened. The hot bath was a luxury that brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She scrubbed away days of grime and humiliation, watching the dirty water as if it could carry away her memories too. Mrs. Henderson had provided a simple brown dress that was too large but clean. When Olivia emerged for dinner, she felt almost human again. She ate alone at the small table in the corner of the dining room, aware of the whispers from the other boarders. Her father's gambling and her near auction were clearly the talk of the town. She kept her eyes on her plate, forcing down each bite of stew despite her lack of appetite. A knock at the boarding house door interrupted the meal. Mrs. Henderson returned to the dining room with Sheriff Vance following behind her. "Evening, Miss Owens," he said, removing his hat. "I brought something that might be useful." He placed a small bundle on the table. "My daughter would have been about your age now. These were hers." Olivia carefully unwrapped the bundle to find a hairbrush, a small bottle of rose water, and a faded blue ribbon. "I can't accept these," she said softly. "They're just gathering dust at my place," he replied. "Better they get some use." Their conversation was interrupted by pounding on the front door. Mrs. Henderson huffed in irritation, but her face paled when she opened it to find 3 men from Ward's gang standing on her porch. "Sheriff," called a voice from the doorway. "Mr. Ward would like a word." Dalton's hand moved instinctively to his holster. "Tell Ward if he wants to talk, he can come to my office during daylight hours." The tallest of the men stepped into the dining room, ignoring Mrs. Henderson's protests. "This ain't about you, Sheriff. It's about the Owens woman. That debt doesn't just disappear." "The law says it does," Dalton replied evenly. "A man can't gamble away another person's freedom." The man's gaze shifted to Olivia. "Ward says he'll forget the whole thing if she comes to work at the Gilded Lily. Good pay, nice clothes." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Better than scrubbing floors in this dump." Olivia knew what working at Ward's saloon would mean. The women there weren't just serving drinks. "Miss Owens isn't interested," the sheriff said before she could respond. The man's smile vanished. "Wasn't asking you, lawman." Olivia found her courage. "Please tell Mr. Ward I decline his offer." A tense silence filled the room. The other boarders had shrunk back, leaving only Olivia, the sheriff, and the 3 men in a standoff. "Ward won't take kindly to this," the man said finally. "He doesn't like being refused." "And I don't like threats in my town," Dalton replied. "Now get out before I arrest you for disturbing the peace." After the men left, Olivia released a shaky breath. "You shouldn't have interfered. You're making yourself a target." The sheriff's eyes met hers. "Miss Owens, men like Ward only understand one thing, someone standing up to them. If we give an inch, they'll take everything." That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. Every creak of the boarding house timbers made her heart race. When dawn finally broke, she dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson already in the kitchen. "Early riser?" the older woman asked, eyeing her suspiciously. "I'd like to earn my keep," Olivia replied. "I can cook, clean, mend clothing, anything that might be useful." Mrs. Henderson studied her for a long moment. "Can you read and write?" Olivia nodded. "My mother was a school teacher before she died. She taught me well." "Then you're in luck. The general store needs someone to manage their accounts and correspondence. Previous girl got married last month. Pays not much, but it's honest work." By noon, Olivia had secured the position at Carson's general store. Mr. Carson was a kindly older man whose eyesight was failing, making bookkeeping increasingly difficult. He seemed relieved to have help and didn't ask about her past. The store's location on Main Street gave Olivia a clear view of the sheriff's office across the way. Throughout the day, she found herself glancing up whenever someone entered or exited the building. Twice, she caught sight of Dalton Vance making his rounds, his tall figure unmistakable even at a distance. A week passed, then two. Olivia settled into a routine, working at the store by day and helping Mrs. Henderson with chores in the evenings to earn her keep. The whispers about her gradually subsided as newer gossip took precedence. She saved every penny of her wages, determined to build a life that couldn't be gambled away. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Sheriff Vance entered the general store while Olivia was inventorying a shipment of fabric. "Miss Owens," he greeted her, hat in hand. "I heard you found employment. That's good news." She smiled, surprised by how pleased she was to see him. "Mr. Carson has been very kind. The work suits me." "I'm glad to hear it." He seemed about to say more when the store door burst open. A young boy rushed in, his face flushed with excitement. "Sheriff, there's a fight at the Gilded Lily. They're tearing the place apart." Dalton immediately placed his hat back on his head. "Stay here," he told Olivia, though she hadn't suggested otherwise. Ward's men have been looking for an excuse to cause trouble. After he left, Olivia couldn't focus on her work. Through the store window, she saw more men running toward the saloon, some looking eager to join the fray, others just curious spectators. Mr. Carson shook his head disapprovingly. "Sheriff shouldn't have to deal with that rabble alone," the old man muttered. "Town council keeps promising deputies, but the money never materializes." An hour passed with no sign of the sheriff returning. When Mr. Carson stepped out to speak with a friend, Olivia made a decision. She removed her apron, told Mr. Carson she was taking her lunch break, and hurried across the street toward the saloon. The scene outside the Gilded Lily was chaotic. A crowd had gathered to watch as several bloodied men were escorted out by the sheriff. Dalton's shirt was torn and a bruise was forming on his cheek, but he maintained his authoritative stance as he dispersed the onlookers. "Show's over," he announced. "Anyone not involved, clear the street." As the crowd thinned, Olivia approached him. "Are you hurt?" He seemed surprised to see her. "Nothing serious. What are you doing here?" "I was worried," she admitted, "when you didn't come back." Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps that anyone would worry about him. "Just a saloon brawl, happens at least once a month." A man staggered out of the saloon, supported by two companions. His face was badly beaten, one eye swollen shut. He pointed a shaky finger at the sheriff. "This ain't over, Vance," he slurred. "Ward knows what you did." Dalton didn't respond, but Olivia noticed his jaw tightening. After the men stumbled away, she touched his arm lightly. "What did he mean?" the sheriff sighed. "I've been investigating Ward's operations. Illegal gambling, smuggling, probably worse. The territorial marshal is sending evidence to the federal prosecutor next month." Olivia felt a chill despite the warm day. "That's why they're targeting you," he nodded. "And why you should keep your distance, Miss Owens. Being associated with me isn't safe right now." His words stung more than she expected. "I'm not afraid of Elijah Ward." "You should be," Dalton said grimly. "He's a dangerous man when crossed." That evening, as Olivia helped Mrs. Henderson prepare dinner, the widow seemed unusually talkative. "Heard you were at the saloon today," she remarked, slicing carrots with precise movements. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I was concerned about the sheriff." Mrs. Henderson made a noncommittal sound. "Man's been alone too long. Not natural. My Herbert was gone 3 years before I considered another man's company, but 5 years is excessive." "I'm sure the sheriff has his reasons," Olivia replied carefully. "Course he does. Blames himself for his wife's death. Mary had a difficult pregnancy, doctor warned against it, but they wanted a child so badly." She shook her head. "When she died, something in him broke. threw himself into being sheriff like he was seeking punishment. Olivia considered this new information as she kneaded bread dough. Did their child survive? No, little girl was stillborn. Mrs. Henderson lowered her voice. He visits their graves every Sunday after church, brings wildflowers in summer, pine boughs in winter. The following day was Sunday. Olivia attended the small church service, sitting in the back pew. Sheriff Vance was there too, his presence commanding attention even in civilian clothes. After the service, she watched from a distance as he walked to the cemetery on the hill behind the church. She hadn't planned to follow, but found herself drawn up the path, stopping when she saw him kneeling beside two gravestones. His head was bowed, his broad shoulders slumped in a way she'd never seen before. The private moment of grief was so intimate that she turned to leave, but her movement caught his attention. "Miss Owens," he called, rising to his feet. "Church let out some time ago." Embarrassed, she approached slowly. "I'm sorry to intrude, I was just—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain her presence without sounding like she'd been spying. "It's all right," he said. "I was about to leave anyway." The two modest headstones bore the names Mary Elizabeth Vance and baby girl Vance. Fresh wildflowers lay across both graves. "They would have been happy to meet you," Dalton said unexpectedly. Mary always believed in helping others stand on their own 2 feet. Olivia looked up at him, struck by the openness in his expression. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." She was. His voice was soft with memory. "She taught at the schoolhouse, had a way of seeing the best in people even when they couldn't see it themselves." They walked back down the hill together, a comfortable silence between them. At the bottom, where their paths would diverge, Dalton cleared his throat. "Would you, that is, if you're not otherwise engaged, would you join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant this evening, as a proper thank you for your concern yesterday?" Olivia smiled, warmed by his formal invitation. "I would be delighted, Sheriff Vance." "Dalton," he corrected gently. "If we're to dine together, you might as well use my given name." "Then you must call me Olivia," she replied. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Copper Creek, with real tablecloths and a cook who had trained in St. Louis. Olivia wore her best dress, still the brown one Mrs. Henderson had given her, but freshly pressed and adorned with the blue ribbon from Dalton's daughter. She felt eyes upon them as they entered, the sheriff and the woman who'd nearly been auctioned in the town square. Dalton seemed oblivious to the stares, his attention focused solely on ensuring Olivia was comfortable. Over roast beef and potatoes, they shared stories of their lives before Copper Creek. Olivia told him about growing up in Ohio, how her mother had instilled in her a love of books and learning before succumbing to influenza when Olivia was 12. She spoke of her father's descent into gambling and drinking after her mother's death, and their westward journey that had ended so tragically in Wyoming. Dalton spoke of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his time as a Union soldier during the war, and his decision to head west afterward seeking peace. He'd found it briefly with Mary until fate had other plans. "You ever think of leaving Copper Creek?" Olivia asked. "Starting fresh somewhere else?" He considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I think about who would replace me, whether they'd stand up to men like Ward. This town has good people in it who deserve protection." "You can't save everyone," she said gently. His eyes met hers across the table. "I can try." As they left the restaurant, the evening air had cooled considerably. Dalton draped his coat over Olivia's shoulders without comment, the weight of it comforting around her. "I should get you back to the boarding house," he said. "Mrs. Henderson will be wondering where you are." Olivia laughed. "Mrs. Henderson is likely watching from her window as we speak, counting the minutes until she can interrogate me." Their walk back was interrupted by a familiar figure stepping out of an alley. Elijah Ward himself, dressed in his characteristic fine suit, a gold watch chain gleaming across his vest. "Well, well," Ward said, his voice smooth as oil. "The sheriff and the Owens girl, how cozy." Dalton positioned himself slightly in front of Olivia. "Evening, Ward, out for a stroll." Ward's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just checking on my investments." Copper Creek is full of opportunities for a man who knows where to look. "And threats for those who look too closely," Dalton countered. Ward chuckled. "Sheriff, I'm merely a businessman. If people feel threatened by that, perhaps they have something to hide." His gaze shifted to Olivia. "Miss Owens, my offer still stands. The Gilded Lily could use a woman of your quality." "My answer hasn't changed," she replied firmly. Ward sighed dramatically. "Loyalty is admirable but misplaced in this case. Our good sheriff isn't being entirely honest with you." Dalton's hand moved to his holster. "That's enough, Ward. She doesn't know, does she?" Ward's eyes gleamed with malicious delight. "About your deal with her father." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "What deal?" "Mr. Owens was losing badly that night," Ward continued, ignoring Dalton's warning glare. "Desperate men make desperate bargains. He offered information instead of money information about certain shipments coming through Copper Creek. Our sheriff here was very interested." "He's twisting the truth," Dalton said to Olivia. "Your father approached me about Ward's operations, yes, but I never encouraged him to gamble or to put himself in danger." Ward's smile widened. "Yet you let him continue losing at my tables, building evidence against me while his debts mounted." "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" "You're saying my father was informing on Ward's illegal activities?" Olivia asked Dalton, struggling to understand. "For you, not exactly," Dalton replied, his expression pained. "He came to me after he was already in deep. Said he wanted to make things right, get out from under Ward's thumb. I told him to stay away from the tables, but he insisted one big win would solve everything. And then he conveniently died," Ward added. "Heart failure, they said, very sudden for a man of 50. The implication hung in the air between them. Olivia stepped back, her mind racing. "My father's death wasn't natural," she whispered. "I couldn't prove it," Dalton admitted, "but I suspected. That's why I've been building a case against Ward ever since." Ward's expression remained smug. "And now the lovely Miss Owens knows the truth. Her father died because our sheriff used him as bait." "That's a lie," Dalton said through gritted teeth. "I warned him to stay away from Ward." "But you didn't stop him," Olivia said quietly. "You let him continue informing on Ward even knowing how dangerous it was." Dalton's silence was answer enough. Ward tipped his hat mockingly. "I'll leave you two to discuss this touching revelation. Good evening." After Ward disappeared around a corner, Olivia removed Dalton's coat from her shoulders and handed it back to him. "I need to think," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please don't follow me." She walked quickly back to the boarding house, her mind in turmoil. Her father had been many things: a gambler, a drinker, often neglectful, but he'd never been a deliberate liar. If he'd been informing on Ward's operations, perhaps he'd truly been trying to redeem himself in some way. And Dalton had allowed it, perhaps even encouraged it, knowing the risks. For justice, for the law, but at what cost? Sleep eluded her that night. By morning, Olivia had made a decision. She arrived at the sheriff's office before dawn, finding Dalton at his desk, looking as though he hadn't slept either. "Miss Owens," he said, rising quickly. "I was going to come see you today to explain." "I want to help," she interrupted. "I want to finish what my father started." His expression shifted from surprise to concern. "No, absolutely not. Ward is more dangerous than you realize." My father died trying to do the right thing, Olivia insisted. For once in his life, he was trying to make amends. I won't let that be for nothing. Dalton ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Olivia, I can't ask you to put yourself in danger. I already have one death on my conscience. You're not asking, I'm offering. She met his gaze steadily. I worked as my father's bookkeeper for years. I know his system, how he tracked information. If he kept records of what he learned about Ward's operations, I might be able to find them. And if Ward discovers what you're doing, he already thinks I'm working with you. I might as well make it true. Their argument was interrupted by the arrival of a telegram messenger. Dalton read the message, his expression darkening. The territorial marshal has been delayed. He won't be here for another month. He crumpled the paper in his fist. Ward has friends in high places. They're stalling the investigation. Then we have time to gather more evidence, Olivia said. Dalton studied her for a long moment. You're as stubborn as your father was. I'll take that as a compliment, she replied with a small smile. Over the following weeks, Olivia maintained her position at the general store while secretly searching for her father's hidden records. She combed through his few remaining possessions, visited places he had frequented, and discreetly questioned people who had known him. Her efforts brought her and Dalton together frequently, often meeting in the sheriff's office after dark to share information. Their shared purpose created a bond between them that deepened with each passing day. 3 weeks into their investigation, Olivia made a breakthrough. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the room her father had rented at the saloon was a small journal. The entries were coded, but after several days of effort she deciphered his system. It's all here, she told Dalton excitedly one evening. Dates, shipments, names of contacts. He was thorough. Dalton examined the journal with growing amazement. This is enough to put Ward away for years. Your father was braver than I gave him credit for. Olivia's heart swelled with pride. He was trying to be the man my mother had loved, I think, to leave me something better than debts and regrets. Their celebration was short-lived. The following day, Olivia arrived at the store to find it ransacked, Mr. Carson tied up in the storage room. After freeing him and summoning the sheriff, she discovered her room at the boarding house had also been searched. They're looking for the journal, Dalton said grimly. Someone must have seen us meeting. But they didn't find it, Olivia replied. The journal was safely hidden in a hollowed-out Bible that had belonged to her mother, kept in a locked drawer in the sheriff's office. That night, Dalton insisted Olivia stay at his small house on the edge of town. It's not proper, he acknowledged, but it's safer than the boarding house. I'll sleep in the barn. His home was modest but well-maintained, with bookshelves lining one wall and simple, sturdy furniture. A framed photograph of a smiling young woman, Mary, sat on the mantel. She would like you, Dalton said, following Olivia's gaze. Your determination, your loyalty to your father despite everything. I'm not sure I deserve such praise, Olivia replied. My father and I were estranged for years before his death. I was angry at him for gambling away our home, for dragging me across the country. Yet here you are, risking everything to finish what he started. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Dalton cleared his throat and stepped back. I'll check the perimeter before I head to the barn. Lock the door behind me. Alone in Dalton's house, surrounded by his possessions and memories, Olivia felt a strange peace. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of their situation, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Dawn broke with the sound of approaching horses. Dalton burst into the house, his expression urgent. Ward's men are coming, at least 6 of them. Olivia's heart raced. The journal, already secured with a trusted friend. He handed her his spare revolver. Do you know how to use this? She nodded. Her father had taught her to shoot years ago. I've sent word to the territorial marshal, Dalton continued, but they won't get here in time. We need to hold out until help arrives. The first shots came as they were barricading the windows. A bullet splintered the wood frame inches from Olivia's head. "Get down," Dalton shouted, pulling her to the floor. They crawled to opposite windows, each taking position to defend the small house. Outside, Ward's men had surrounded them, firing periodically to keep them pinned down. "We just want the girl and the journal," one of the men called out. "Hand them over and you can walk away, Sheriff." "Not going to happen," Dalton shouted back, firing a warning shot that sent the men scrambling for cover. Hours passed in a tense standoff. Ammunition was running low and there was no sign of reinforcements. As dusk approached, Ward himself appeared at the edge of the property. "This has gone far enough, Vance," he called. "I'm a reasonable man. Let's make a deal." Dalton exchanged a glance with Olivia. "He's getting desperate," he whispered. "That's good and bad. Good because he might make a mistake. Bad because desperate men are unpredictable." "What kind of deal would he offer?" Olivia asked. "Nothing we can trust." Dalton checked his ammunition. "I'm down to 6 bullets." "4 here," Olivia replied grimly. A new sound caught their attention, a wagon approaching fast. Through the window they saw a dust cloud rising from the road. "That's not Ward's men," Dalton said, a note of hope in his voice. "They're already positioned around us." The wagon came into view, driven by none other than Mrs. Henderson. Behind her were several more wagons filled with townspeople, many armed with rifles and shotguns. "Reinforcements," Olivia breathed in relief. Ward's men, outnumbered by the arriving townspeople, began to fall back. Ward himself stood his ground, fury evident on his face even from a distance. "This isn't over, Vance," he shouted before retreating with his men. Mrs. Henderson marched up to the house, shotgun in hand. "Thought you might need some help," she said matter-of-factly. "Got tired of waiting for the marshal to show up." Dalton laughed in disbelief. "Mrs. Henderson, you are a sight for sore eyes." "Don't get used to it," she replied gruffly. "And don't think I've forgotten that Miss Owens spent the night here. There'll be talk." The territorial marshal arrived the following day with a contingent of deputies. With the evidence from Jacob Owens' journal and testimonies from townspeople who had suffered under Ward's influence, they had more than enough to arrest Ward and his associates. As Ward was led away in handcuffs, he fixed one last hateful glare on Dalton and Olivia. "You'll regret this," he promised. "Both of you." "The only regret I have," Dalton replied, "is not stopping you sooner." After the marshal's party departed with their prisoners, a strange quiet fell over Copper Creek. The town felt different somehow, as if a shadow had been lifted. Olivia found Dalton at his wife's grave that evening, the setting sun painting the cemetery in golden light. "I thought I might find you here," she said softly. He didn't seem surprised by her presence. "I was telling Mary about everything that's happened, about you." Olivia stood beside him, her hand finding his. "What did you tell her?" "That I've met someone brave and determined. Someone who reminds me that life goes on, even after great loss." He turned to face her fully. "Someone I've come to care for deeply." "Dalton," she began, uncertain what to say. "I know it's too soon," he continued. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why this might not be wise. But when I saw you standing up to Ward's men, fighting not just for justice but for your father's memory, I realized something." "What?" she asked, her heart racing. "That you were worth more than 2 copper pennies the day I met you, worth more than all the gold in these mountains." He squeezed her hand gently. "You were worth opening my heart again, even though I thought it was closed forever." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "I never thought I'd find a home again after everything that happened, my father's debts being put up for auction like cattle. But you gave me more than freedom that day. You gave me hope. As the last light of day faded, Dalton Vance kissed Olivia Owens among the gravestones, a promise of new beginnings amidst memories of the past. 1 year later, Copper Creek celebrated the wedding of Sheriff Dalton Vance and the town's new schoolteacher, Olivia Owens. Mrs. Henderson, who had appointed herself unofficial guardian of the bride, wept openly during the ceremony, though she later denied it vehemently. The small church overflowed with townspeople, many of whom had stood with them against Ward's men that fateful day. Mr. Carson gave the bride away, beaming with pride as if she were his own daughter. As they exchanged vows, Olivia wore a simple white dress with a familiar blue ribbon in her hair, a connection to the past that now symbolized their future together. The gold wedding band Dalton placed on her finger had been specially made by the town's blacksmith, inscribed inside with words only she would see. Worth more than gold. Their life together would not always be easy. The frontier remained a harsh place, with dangers both natural and man-made. But in each other, they had found something beyond price, a love forged in adversity, tempered by loss, and strengthened by shared purpose. And on quiet evenings, when they sat together on the porch of their small house watching the sun set over the Wyoming hills, Dalton would sometimes turn to his wife and say with a smile, "Best 2 copper pennies I ever spent." To which Olivia would always reply, "And the richest I've ever been."